everybody. Thank you for coming along. So lovely to see so many of you. And it's lovely to have everybody on a meeting version rather than a webinar version, so we can all kind of see each other and say hi and interact with each other, because obviously at the minute, a lot of us are missing that. So we're going to wait for a couple of people just to arrive. We've got quite a lot of people signed up today. In total, obviously some people will be catching up afterwards, but we had over 80 people register for today's event. So this is obviously the first part of our 2021 diversity and inclusion campaign that's come with us from 2020 into this year. One of the only good things that's come into this year with us. And I'm just really excited to see so many of you here. And obviously we've got Ben joining us, and we're talking today about how to raise and support the profile of our male colleagues in the business support industry. So as we just start to welcome more people in, Ben and I are just going to introduce ourselves. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with me, I see a couple of people who are our members, and I see a couple of people who have been to our events before. But for those of you who are new here, I'm Jess. I'm the founder of the Assistant Room. I spent over 10 years as an executive assistant. And in 2016, I just felt really burnt out. I felt really unappreciated. So I thought I'd take 2 months just to kind of realign myself and my values and really take time to understand what I wanted going forward. And in that time, I started the Assistant Room. And within 2 months, it got to a point that I didn't need to go back to work for anybody else, which I was actually quite disappointed about, because I loved being a PA. But since 2016, we have grown into being one of the biggest networks for PAs and EAs in the world. We have close to 20,000 people who regularly engage with what we do. So hopefully this conversation, whether you're watching it live or whether you're catching up with us afterwards, will be heard far and wide, which will be amazing. And we have lots of different resources to help everybody who works within the business support industry, whether it's our blog, whether it's our podcast, whether it's attending events like this, whether it's becoming an official Assistant Room member. There are so many different ways that we can support you. And we very much like to promote the idea that we're very reactive to what we know you all need and want, as well as being proactive. So if any of you are feeling like you'd want to continue being part of the Assistant Room, and there's something in particular that you would love to see us investing our time in to give you that training or experience in, please let me know, because I will always be super happy to organise whatever we need to become more educated, become more connected with each other, and just enjoy ourselves, really. So that's me. I'm going to pass over to Ben to introduce himself. I know that everybody has had the opportunity to have a look at the bio that we all that he very kindly shared with me. Before we move on to him though, can I just double check with everyone that everybody has their microphone muted, just so that we can kind of make sure that the conversation is focused on Ben, and we haven't got any cat sounds or traffic sounds in the background distracting from it. So if we could do that, that would be amazing. But Ben, over to you. Let's talk about you. Give us the lowdown. Who is Ben Stevenson?
Thank you very much. I think you've hit the nail on the head there with regards to the theme for this year, isn't it, in terms of various interruptions from everyday life that people have become accustomed to, but there we are. So yeah, I'm Ben. Thank you for obviously joining myself and Jess today. It's a topic that's really close to my heart and Jess's as well. I've been an assistant in some way, shape or form since around 2013. So prior to that, I was kind of the usual post-school kind of retail jobs and bits and pieces, and then joined a company called UCheck, who basically offer pre-employment vetting and screening services to a variety of different people, or care homes, all the way up to HMRC. That's massive spectrum. Very small family-run business, so joined them, and kind of, again, typical executive assistant role in terms of wearing lots of hats, looking after the operations side of the business, looking after the customer service team, HR, a little bit of finance, and then obviously, herding the directors in the right direction and making sure we're maximising their time as well. So I had a good 3 or 4 years with them, really kind of got to know all different parts of the business. And that's where my kind of love and passion really for this kind of role and this industry really came from. So 2017 came around, and I thought, do you know what? It's time for a change, time for a bit of a move. And so I decided to make the jump to London. Something I've always really wanted to do, always really, really excited and keen to get there. And I landed my dream job. I think if I could have written something down on paper in terms of location, office type, people, role, it literally fitted the bill in every way, shape or form. So it was definitely a good sign. I think that the stars had aligned on that one. So yes, I made the move to Globelec in 2017, based in the heart of the city. Fantastic people, fantastic company. Joined them as office manager and PA to the chief HR officer. Again, just step up massively from UCheck, and it was just an exciting time for me. And just I got exposed to so many different areas of the business. I got to travel quite a lot. I often plug with my friends and my family about the trips to Mauritius and various places. It sounds very exotic, but when you're working in a very hot conference room with no air conditioning and then lots of marquees and tents, it's not so much fun. And obviously no downtime within the roles that we're in anyway. But got to see some lovely scenery. So yeah, had a great time with them, and then moved to the Northeast in 2019. So when I moved to the Northeast, it was more of a kind of lifestyle change, just a bit of a chance to get out of the city and enjoy a little bit of city life, because I do like to be kind of near a city in terms of where I'm based. And then I came across Bloom. So Bloom, fantastic organisation. Really appealed to me because they previously based in London. Our executive chairman's London based as well, and just a really fantastic group of people, and a really growing company as well. It was just a real pleasure to kind of come into the role. I think for me, within that position, my execs hadn't had this level of support before, so it was really kind of building it from the ground up and setting those procedures and processes and kind of educating and working with your team to really to build efficiencies and drive the business forward. And we've seen a huge amount of growth over the last 12 months, even with COVID and everything that's been going on. It's been a really exciting time for us, and it's going to continue to be over the next 12 months. And I'm just, really, really, really pleased that everything's kind of led me to this point in terms of where I am now.
Thank you so much. That was perfectly eloquent. That's one of the, I really think that as PAs and EAs, we need to be able to absolutely nail our effectively elevator pitch, and I think that's absolutely amazing. So thank you for giving us that awesome introduction. Now I know that you and I have chatted pretty much since Christmas about how we want this conversation to go and how we think that this conversation needs to flow in terms of content and adding really impactful, immediately implementable things that we can all do to start really supporting and raising the profile of our male colleagues, both before they actually come into the industry and seeing this as a viable job for men as well as women, but also how we can support and raise up the profile of the men that we have internally already. And we've spoken so many times about that preconception of, if you're a male PA, your sexuality, your ability to do the job, how serious you're going to be taken, how well respected you're going to be. And so we're going to hopefully be covering all of those topics. But what I'd like to really encourage everybody to do is just follow along with the conversation, note down any kind of questions that you've got as we go, or pop them in the chat box. Keep kind of engaging with each other. This is supposed to be a really nice, easy conversation to follow with as much engagement as you all want to kind of get involved in. So let's talk about, to begin with, from your point of view, Ben, why you think this topic is so important, and why basically when I called you and said, would you be up for this? Why it appealed to you so much? Because we both agreed that this isn't really a conversation that's had very often.
No.
Obviously, we're talking about this topic as part of our diversity and inclusion campaign. And a really big part of that is addressing that imbalance of men and women within the industry. So yeah, tell us why you think it's important, why are you here? Why have you chosen to come and hang out with us today?
I think it's for a couple of years now, it's really been something that's quite passionate and close to my heart, really, really on a personal level. I think the industry is in need of a significant paradigm shift in terms of how we address the imbalance of men and women, within the roles that we operate. I think the most recent figures that have been quoted out there are around this 6% of all kind of administrative professionals are men. And now, does that? I think the question you ask yourself after the back of that, does that surprise you? I mean, is that right? What could that be caused by? And what's stopping people from coming into the industry? And again, yeah, for me, it's kind of driven by my own previous self-past doubt and experiences, and it was something that actually really almost drove me from the industry kind of 18 months ago. I think that there's also that assumption and kind of age-old mindset that men kind of just suffer in silence and get on with it. And I think we actually need to kind of have this conversation, start to kind of normalize it, show that it's okay to talk about these things. If guys are struggling in the industry and they find themselves at the end of discrimination or unconscious bias, that there is a kind of way forward that we can kind of come together and actually drive. So that's why it's kind of on my radar anyway.
Yeah, and I think that when we chatted earlier this week, just to kind of go over everything that we knew we wanted to talk about and make sure it will double check if there are any changes. We said, didn't we, that there is this stereotype that men are lazier than women, men are not as organized as women, and that probably plays into the reasons why there could be an imbalance of men and women to such a huge extent.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure that we weren't coming at this conversation from we feel hard done by as guys. Obviously there is discrimination across the board, and this is a very, very powerful industry full of lots of really powerful people, and it's going to take some time to start leveling out a little bit. I mean, I think there is so much that we can all do individually to start really promoting this role for what it truly is, not necessarily just to say, this is not just a girl's job, as Victoria Dara perfectly puts a couple of years ago in her fantastic campaign regarding this exact same topic. But this industry as a whole is very, very misunderstood. And we all suffer from, I did, obviously I'm not a PA anymore, but everyone suffers from a lot of preconceived notions that this is either a low skilled job, or this isn't something that requires a lot of skill, when we all know that's the complete opposite, because you cannot learn the skills it takes to be a PA from emotional intelligence perspective. You've either got it or you haven't. Definitely. And that really differentiates you as a PA. So I just want to say, there's so many things that we can talk about regarding how we can improve our industry, but I think this is a really good way for us to start talking about that gender imbalance and hopefully continuing that conversation and reviving it a little bit more and bringing it to people's attention a little bit. So let's talk about the damage that discrimination really does, because there is discrimination across so many different areas, whether it's race, background, gender inequality. And so in terms of how we can move forward, how do you think that we can really start putting easy to implement and immediate kind of actionable ways to support men within the industry from your experience? And have you ever come across anything where you have experienced direct discrimination?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of circumstances for me personally. I think just to touch upon what you said, I think that we've all kind of grown up in a society, and whether that's going to stem from what our parents think or what people think around what roles people should fulfill, and that does impact and drive what people think and see as what is acceptable for a guy to do. I've personally been in situations where I've been interviewed by kind of C-level executives who really kind of quiz you to the point where you actually feel patronised and uncomfortable, and they just don't understand why a guy who I personally was going for a PA role, and they kind of, you get those facial expressions of, you're going to be on reception, and you're going to have to get coffee for people, and you're going to have to be kind of running after people all the time. And that in itself is an issue, because that for me shows a massive misunderstanding in what even some of our execs understand what we do, and the scope that our roles have nowadays. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, in interview circumstances like that, it has been very challenging, and you leave the organisation one with a sour taste about that particular company and that individual, but you also then start to question, why are you doing what you're doing? Why your own motivations for coming into this industry? Why are you, why are you being driven to actually question your ability? And that's the thing for me, like I touched on earlier on, 18 months ago, when I significantly questioned why I was in the industry. To coin a bit of a cliche, I actually kind of hit 30 in 2019, and I kind of took stock and took a step back and thought, okay, well, what have I done in my life? Where am I? What do I want to be? Where am I going, essentially? And I ended up going down a massive rabbit hole, rightly or wrongly, and really started drilling down to, okay, well, I'm on a path, and everything I've done so far has led me to the role I'm in now. And I love Bloom. I love my job. It's, again, like I said earlier, it's a fantastic organisation to be in. But then I started to kind of question myself as, how am I going to feel, or what are people going to see or think of me when I'm a 40, 50, 60-year-old executive assistant? I mean, granted, development plans, things can change, roles adapt and roles evolve, but ultimately that's what I don't see myself, or didn't see myself leaving the industry. And that really, really kind of struck a chord with me, and actually made me feel really uneasy, really question my choices that I'd made, what I'd done, everything prior to that to get to this point. And it really just made me feel as I'd wasted my time. You start thinking, do I have a shelf life? Does this career have a shelf life? Am I going to be hireable? What are people going to think about me when I'm still doing this role in 20 years' time? And do you know what? There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. There really is nothing wrong with it. And it actually took me to the point where I resigned from Bloom, and tendered my resignation. And it was when we had a new incoming managing director, and it was quite a bit of upheaval for the business anyway. And to get caught up in that, and he kind of took me aside, and had really kind of serious conversations outside of the business to kind of really drill down as to why I felt like I was feeling like that, and why I didn't have that self-belief. And whilst I was driving my own change at that point, it was compounded by all the society pressures and the family pressures. And I think by raising this topic and normalizing these conversations, and starting to have more kind of networks and events that actually contribute, have men contributing, or awards that have men highlighted, it just helps us to really move away from a stereotypical understanding of what an EA should be, and actually really what it actually could be. Because I think it's an amazing kind of spectrum in terms of where we can drive this role, and how it's going to drive forward even more, especially after COVID. Obviously, there's been significant changes there. So yeah, I think that was always my main kind of experiences with it, that significantly impacted me.
Yeah, and I think you're 100% right. It kind of signals a greater issue that we've got from an industry perspective, where it is very misunderstood. There is a lack of understanding to what we do, the value that we bring, and why it's important that we are in businesses. I mean, I say all the time, if we think about it, I almost feel as though our industry in itself we're a little bit of a contradiction, because we know that organizations and businesses could not live without us. There's that phrase that we all use, and we all kind of make a joke about it. If I went on holiday for 2 weeks, I'd come back and the place wouldn't exist, because it would have fallen to pieces. but yet we're not there representing and championing ourselves in the right way to the right people. So we should recognize the fact that we have got that power, and that makes us more valuable than I think any of us actually truly realize deep down. You know, if, say, for example, if we've got the monopoly on something, if we are, you know, absolutely indispensable, if companies could not work without us, that means salaries should be higher, opportunities should be greater, and discrimination should not exist. I almost feel as though perhaps maybe if everybody kind of really acknowledged the power that PAs had, maybe they'd all be a bit threatened and feel scared and not come in the next day if they knew actually what we were capable of, which we know what we're capable of. But yeah, it's very, very strange. I mean, it's a brilliant industry to be involved in, but there's so many things that we need to do to start making a really powerful, positive impact going forward, to make sure that the generations coming into this industry really are appreciated for the value that they do bring. So I think that that's a fantastic analogy from you. And obviously a really big part of these conversations is us just understanding people's authentic stories and understanding the you know, the experiences that you've been through, which contributes to these conversations, because honesty is the best policy. We're never going to be able to get anywhere if we sugarcoat something, regardless of what it is. So injustice needs to be addressed, and I'm just super grateful for honesty. So thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about the second part of that question. We said that we wanted to focus on two things, you know, how we can start really supporting and raising the profile of the internal and existing male PAs that we've got, but also how we can introduce this industry as a viable career option and career path for those who are potentially looking for a job as they're coming out of university. Perhaps, you know, you've got a summer intern that has fantastic skills that you know would be a great asset to your PA team, but they're not necessarily connected to that idea from an exec perspective because they're a man. And I think that is a damaging view for women in itself and for the current industry. So if we were going to talk about, to begin with, how we can encourage and support and raise the profile of our male PAs who already exist, what would those be?
I think for me, I mean, a starting point that I have championed in the past within organisations is drive the discussions within your organisation, have your town hall meetings, have your workshops, create a talking point about it. And it doesn't necessarily need to be completely focused on this particular topic. You can look at it as wider education of the executive assistant role and use this opportunity as a spotlight to actually say, you know, this is what we can bring to the table. This is how enriched the industry can become by having a really balanced mix of guys and women within the industry. And I think by starting those smaller conversations, like I said earlier, you normalise the concept of it, and you normalise the fact that actually it's more than acceptable for guys to be in this industry because they bring something that maybe that others don't. And I think not looking at that from not necessarily saying that guys and women have different skill sets, but I think as individuals we have different skill sets, and I think that's why it's important that all these things need to be highlighted. But you could also look at it as well from a job title point of view, because I actually had a conversation with our head of people last week around executive assistant job titles and how some guys are perhaps put off by the assistant role or the assistant title, and how we can and how that can change and evolve over time. You look at things like business executives, business support, or business admin managers. There's so many more ways that we can actually start to kind of, I say gender neutralize, but kind of, you know, cover over all the preconceived ideas that people have that are linked to those titles, and just move away from them and actually create something that is far more representative and far more acknowledged, but just having a wider acknowledgement of what we actually do, because we do, you know, the modern EA is far more than an assistant these days. We have the handle on the steer of the business, and with the ear of our executives, and we are that right hand person for them. We are that go to person. So we need to be able to confidently acknowledge that within our companies. I think so. We also spoke about as well from a recruitment point of view, and if you whether you've got an internal resourcer or you're using external recruitment agencies, get them to commit to a quota. That's really say to them, we need X amount of guys, or get some males in front of our execs and in front of different leaders within the business. Actually, make a commitment yourself to championing that. And that's a really easy, that's a really quick win, because and that will change mindsets because of the skills that people can see that they bring. And off the back of that as well, in terms of from a recruitment perspective, I'm sure we've all seen it, but probably not so much these days. But I mean, definitely in the past, you come across kind of the wording and the language that's used in job advertising in terms of things like support, understanding, good personality. I know. In the city, sometimes they used to have things like bubbly personality, and it's just having really gender neutral job advertisements that actually encourage people, either who are existing within the organisation who might be thinking of a sidestep into a different role, or also bringing new people into the company and into the industry as well. So I think there's really simple things we can do. Within our existing companies as it stands, but we need to be able to have the confidence to challenge and challenge the status quo. You're going to come across people who are always going to who aren't necessarily going to come out to your way of thinking, but I think you need to be brave enough and be bold enough to actually drive that conversation and start those conversations yourself as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you so much. I think there is kind of unpacking just what you said, because there are so many interesting points. I think from a job description perspective, I think we would all agree that perhaps our industry needs a bit of a revamp. I think there's a really big issue with the fact that, you could be called a personal assistant when you're, at the very beginning of your career, and 15 years later, you're still technically called a personal assistant, but your skill set and your experience is so varied that will really define what you go on to do next. And I just think it's such a unique issue to who we are as an industry, because if you think about it, if you're if you in finance, you join a company as a junior accountant and then you work your way up the ladder. And I think that's something that really needs addressing by a lot of businesses. Google, I think it was last year or the year before, they changed all of the job titles of their executive assistants to executive business partners. And apparently the mindset of people towards those executive business partners just with a title change was incredible. Natalie at Google, we talk about it in a podcast episode that I recorded with her. So if anybody wants to listen about how Google have implemented that change, check out the podcast, because it is such a fascinating conversation. And then to kind of build on a comment that Helen made in the chat box. Thank you very much, Helen, for that amazing contribution. Everyone seems to be really in agreement with you, and I think Ben and I are also in agreement with you. Helen, for everybody who hasn't read her comment, has really said about how we need to build our confidence, and it's about representing ourselves more importantly. And I think that is something that we need to do, not just for ourselves, but for all of our colleagues and all of our PA colleagues. I personally think that if you ever hear any kind of discrimination at work, or anyone saying something inappropriate, it's our responsibility as a group to call that out. And, if you work with a male PA and someone says something inappropriate, I've definitely been in those situations where I've heard something inappropriate, call that out with the person that is suffering from that discrimination, because it's not always easy for people to speak up when they're put on the spot and they don't feel necessarily comfortable with it. I think that's something that would be really important. And yes, the shortlisting of jobs, and especially if you are involved in the recruitment process, which I think every assistant should be involved in the recruitment process, because you are the only person who truly knows the inner workings of your exec's brain. Nobody else does. Nobody else has that understanding. I've personally been in situations before where I've left a business, or I've been leaving a business. I've been the one in charge of organising a shortlist, and I have put men on a shortlist, and they have been turned away purely for the fact that they are men. And it got to the point where I took their names off their CVs. And even then, when I had somebody sat in a boardroom waiting for an interview to take place, my boss at the time walked in, she saw he was a man and walked straight out and wouldn't even have a conversation with him. And I think it just goes to show that there needs to be so much engaging conversation regularly, regardless of what kind of discrimination it's about. Let's make sure it's on the agenda, on the board agenda, not just on it, but at the top of it, and keep pushing it, because we all know how awesome this industry is. And we need to continue to make it better and better and better, because if we make it better for everybody else around us, it improves for us too. So there's so much we can do, isn't there? But I do think the recruitment side of it is a really good place to start. I also think that when you're looking for a job, I always say, when we're working with clients, for example, or different businesses, I want to know that I'm working with the right kind of people. So when I was a PA, I would always say to, the recruiters that I was working with, do you actively promote a very diverse shortlist? I don't want to be one of 10 straight white people on a shortlist. I want to make sure that you're really promoting this industry for the skill set that we have, rather than conforming to what's easiest for you. Because it's just, I think, an absolute cop out. I just think it's ridiculous. This kind of stuff doesn't make any sense to me. We're in 2021, so we need to start holding people accountable for how things are worked within business, and we have the power to do that, which is awesome. Well, before we move on to any kind of Q&A, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience, Ben, regarding this topic?
Yeah, I think there's probably just a few more, just in terms of what else I suppose we could do to just touching on the point in terms of bringing other people into the industry itself. There's one thing I've done at the beginning of this year, or done this month, is starting to reach out to universities, colleges, anything that's kind of looking at business management, anything that has students who are looking for a viable route to get to where they want to be, because engaging at an early age is actually just as key to changing perceptions as it is to talking about it with the people that we work with now. Kids and people in education, they're so their minds are so fresh, and they're not necessarily polluted in some ways by how we see everything as it is currently. But there's also plenty of ambitious graduates, like you said, are coming out of university, want to climb the ladder. And by going into these institutions, by going into universities, going to these open days, having the conversations, offering work placements, work experience, showing them actually you can have an amazing experience getting to know all areas of the business. And do you know what? Some of them will slip through the net, and they will get what they want from it, get what they need from it, and they'll go on and do what they want to do within business. But the people that stay, the people that actually see the role for what it is and the industry for what it is, they will stay and carry on doing that. And those, at the end of the day, those are the people we want to keep within the industries. Those are the people that are going to be the shining stars and will continue to promote these causes and contribute to these kind of sessions. And then to circle another point, from a networking point of view, I think we seem to be in such a rut with our PA networks and online conferences and virtual conferences, where we're just, to coin a phrase, we're just regurgitating the same kind of information, the same skills. And I think we really need to, as you've done with Colleagues Unite, we need to be challenging the status quo and what people what we think people want to hear, and what we think people are going to want to talk about, and actually take that fear to be bold, and start having these conversations, because people out there want to hear this stuff. People want to talk about it, because if you can appeal to one or two people who feel the same way as you do, and make their day a little bit better, or make them feel a little bit better about the situation, you might reach out to someone who's in a very similar position to what I was, who was thinking of leaving the industry, and this can be a male or female. And just, I think if we can keep as many of those people within the industry, champion them, drive the change, light the touch paper for this topic and many others, we'll make a difference and actually achieve what we want to.
Yeah, amazing. I think the best way my advice in terms of anyone trying to organize anything that's a little bit outside of their comfort zone or have these difficult conversations, and maybe this has inspired you to take this conversation internally. The popular opinion is not always the right opinion, and I think that's the best way to think about it. Just because it's the way it's done doesn't mean it's the way it should be done, and we need to constantly challenge this, and we need to constantly be, as Helen said, representing ourselves for the true value that we bring. So thank you so much for sharing all of that wisdom. I knew that we'd have a really, really good conversation. And it looks like everybody is absolutely loving what you've been saying in the chat. So thank you so much, Ben. Is there anybody who would be brave enough to come off of mute and ask any questions? Or if you would rather pop it in the chat box, please do, and I can read it out directly to everybody. No one's brave enough.
It's always that.
I tell you who would be brave enough.
Well, then I'll be brave enough. I'll throw my 2 cents in.
I was going to say, I know who'll be brave enough. I'll choose Alex.
I'll throw my 2 cents in. First off, Ben, obviously fantastic approach, and just obviously putting it on. It's personally being one of the low percentage of male supports within the industry. I think it's fantastic that there's at least a spotlight put on, and to include in the conversation. I think from my perspective, again, at the very beginning of your chat, it was very much the whole discrimination around and changing the mindset and the dynamic of male, I suppose, a male going in for the position in the first place. I couldn't even describe the level of frustration and annoyance, even applying for roles, never mind getting an interview, because the job specs and everything else. But yeah, like I said, it's fantastic. I think you're right, there needs to be a lot more engagement within the industry, for sure, to change the mindset. But I also think as well, we also need to change that engagement with the executives and the businesses themselves, because me personally, I've only ever been able to get in front of female executives because again, it's that mindset of approach. But I think that the one thing, how have you yourself, I suppose, I had it right in my head when I was thinking about the question, but now I'm saying it out loud, it's kind of thrown it. But how have you managed to kind of, I suppose, overcome that mindset when you've gone for jobs, or you've gone to networking events, or you particularly, like Daniel was saying in the chat, like you are the only bloke in the room. How have you changed that perspective, or how in your head, like what kind of advice would you give, I suppose?
Yeah, I think, and exactly what you've said. When you come into this industry and you start going to see recruiters, and there's so many people who are just solely geared towards the female element of this role, and I think when I first started looking at these positions, I was very much the same as you. I kept getting knocked back, and I kept thinking, well, actually, is this going to be the right thing for me? But ultimately, I think you need to challenge yourself to go in and actually showcase who you are, and take away, almost take away the kind of the identity of what people see the role is, and actually showcase yourself as an individual, what you can actually bring to the role, and highlight what that means for an organisation. I think take away the kind of the outer casing, the outer shell of the position, and actually show them the value that you can bring as an individual and as your own person. I think that's a key thing from a recruitment point of view, and also from networking. Just talk to everyone. I mean, just get out there. The best thing you can do is have a conversation with as many different people. Don't be in the corner. Don't feel as though you're you're necessarily the minority in that room. Just talk to as many different people as you can. Explain your story, because that is the only way the word is going to travel. And you're going to. I mean, I've been to a couple of networking events where I've made it my mission to be a colleague in terms of how many people you can speak to and have conversations with, and they are surprised, and they do start to question how you got into the industry, and you do occasionally come across a couple of negative people, and they think, well, actually, this is a female industry, and you kind of and that's fine. If people have their own ideas and their own opinions, and that's just as good as what we're trying to talk about today. But I think just maximize your exposure to the industry, to the people within that, whether that is recruiters. I mean, you might be in the recruitment industry yourself now. Challenge, have those conversations, challenge execs, push back and say, and if an executive comes to you as a recruiter or within the recruitment industry and specifically requests a female, push back, don't do it. Be bold, challenge the business. I mean, do you need a business that much that causes discrimination? Personally, I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. This was definitely, it's sounding sad, but this is like, I've been looking forward to this chat, Jess, for like the best part of the week. So look, yeah, it's been fantastic. Just keep, I think you're right. I think just going into that room and not being put off by the fact that you are the minority in the room is change that dynamic and perception, and really engage and drive yourself forward to want to do it. But I think personally as well, the way I've been kind of viewing the industry, and granted I've not been in the industry a long period of time, but I think the dynamic of the industry internally needs to change, not just externally. I think that's what we obviously yourself and just mentioned, was to change that mindset internally within other peers and EAs or whatever your job title is, because again it can be, it's just, I think it's slightly either off-putting, or it can be you go down a different path. Like you said, it's really kind of drilling down to the core of what the actual role itself is, rather than the standard stereotypical job description that you tend to look at, which is the same for any admin assistant role or admin position role. So yeah, I know I'm rambling now, so sure, but it's been definitely an insight, that's for sure.
One thing I would add for that as well is, just aside from the networking, I mean, social media these days, we all know it's such a powerful tool. Utilize it. Get on LinkedIn, get on Twitter. Share these kind of events, and start those discussions on them, because you'll reach so many more people, and that just, again, it adds to the exposure and the momentum that we need behind these kind of conversations.
I think
perfect. Thank you.
You're so right, Ben and Alex, particularly talking about recruiters. They're not always aware of our identity and image, and they often classify admin professionals of whatever the job title by the industry that they're in, and they don't understand that the skill sets we have are transferable across all industries. And they also don't understand there is a difference between all of the levels, from whether you're called a secretary or an executive assistant or whatever. So we must not allow our role to be defined by other people. If we want to be recognized and seen as relevant and important by recruiters and agencies, we have to raise the awareness that the work we do is a recognizable profession. So that means promoting our development, defining our identity, demonstrating our skills, communicating and developing our skills as influencers, and communicating what our added value is to the business. So everybody needs to be clear about what their career mission is and their vision. So instead of focusing on the role titles, we promote our skill sets or our profiles by giving feedback to and contacting with recruiters and employment agencies and the executives that we work for as well.
Thanks, Helen. Sorry, I saw Ben go to jump in. Ben, do you want to add anything to what Helen said?
No, I mean, just the key thing I picked up there for Helen was influencers, and absolutely we are influencers in our own right, and we can influence such a wide variety of different things from both externally to our companies and internally, and I think that is that is the key. And having your own, I like that you put your own kind of personal career mission and vision, because we get so het up in our company's visions and missions these days. It's such a big thing, such a popular thing, but it's really important to have that for yourself as well. So I think that's a really important point you made.
Yeah.
I think from what Helen said as well, if you don't have that confidence and you're not able to define yourself as that kind of person, look for a mentor and look for somebody who's got experience in really being able to represent themselves in that right way. And Helen, I think you're so right. I mean, I think there are so many issues that can be really if you look at the origin of issues, I think that the recruitment industry really does us a huge disservice, because their KPIs are the wrong way round. They're a sales industry representing people, and the really sad part of it is a lot of the time they just see you as a piece of commission and to get you over the line. So that's why it's also really important to find an amazing recruiter that you can really identify with and have an honest conversation with, and know that they're going to put you forward for the right roles and represent you as a person for that skill set that you've got, and do it with the right clients and with the people that you want. And it's a tricky thing to do, but then again, it goes back to what Ben said earlier about making sure that you have that input with shortlists and that input when it comes to the recruitment part of the process as well, because we are the only people really who knows how to represent this industry properly. I never trusted somebody in HR to be able to replace me internally if I was going for a role. I did it once and it was the biggest mistake of my life. So I think having an active input and an active part in that recruitment process, as soon as you hand your notice in and saying to your exec, I would like to be part of this, and know that whoever's going to be stepping into my role next is the best person for it, will obviously make your transition out of the business a lot easier as well, and a lot happier. But also you'll know that the company is being responsible in terms of who they're hiring, and I did, ultimately taking over your responsibilities of looking after someone who we all get very attached to. So thank you, Helen. Helen, I think I might make you my mentor. Has anybody else got any more questions? I know that Dan, you had quite a few interesting points. I don't know whether or not you're available to kind of say hello to everybody quickly.
I can indeed. Hello, everyone. So the one point that Alex kind of touched on that I mentioned in the chat is, so I go to my local Chamber of Commerce PA group, which is in Hertfordshire, and it's not the kind of thing, although it's probably a little bit of an issue that I'm part of the problem, that I kind of poo-poo it a little bit as well, because I'm the only male who goes there. But I almost feel there's like a degree of like positive discrimination going on there, where it's almost like they try to go out of their way because I'm the only male there. It's like the one example that kind of I used in the chat was that every time we have a session, there's usually sort of like a presenter there from maybe one of the local industries or something. And the one time it was these ladies who went through like a perfume making course, and I absolutely loved it. But the presenters felt that they had to keep apologizing, like specifically to me. And it was like, I'd never said anything that had an issue with it. I love doing those interactive things. Like, it's a great way to get networking with other PAs and that. But it's almost like, I don't know, maybe they feel that they're on eggshells. And I like to think that hopefully I'm not the one giving that impression. But yeah, again, like kind of like how Alex said and how kind of like Ben responded, there's almost this sort of like disconnect there. That I think can sometimes be quite difficult to like find where that middle ground is. And another thing that I kind of mentioned was kind of a little bit more on a personal sense, but I always get my sexuality is always kind of is questioned, because again, I'm a male, I'm in a role that is atypically assumed to be kind of like female oriented. I don't, again, not something that I personally have an issue with. I kind of find it funny now that, I sometimes turn up to these events, and people look a little bit surprised when I mention that my fiance is a female. But it just goes kind of how to show how some of those little things kind of like crop up that aren't even, there's no malice is necessarily meant behind them, but they can, as you've mentioned as well, Jess, there can be these like knock-on effects from those kind of like little micro things that maybe we're not kind of completely aware of.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Daniel, it's Helen here, about the, it's the micro inequities, and people are probably, women in those situations are probably not aware of it until somebody says, oh, there's a man in the room, and then they start thinking, oh, I have to be careful what I say, or we have to be really inclusive and make a conscious effort to be inclusive. So where is it up to the group to welcome you and to accept you as one of them, or is it up to you as the person who's different to just sort of develop a very thick skin and say, oh, well, I'm used to it, or how do you deal with that? Do you kind of roll over?
I guess kind of, I guess in some sense, it's like I said, I sometimes feel not necessarily that I'm part of the problem, but because I kind of poo-poo it, like it doesn't bother me. That's even before I kind of became a PA. I've never been the kind of person that those kind of things have affected me. I've lived a relatively privileged life. I'm quite lucky that I've never had to experience some of the issues that other people have. So something as small as, oh, you're the only guy here, it doesn't make a massive it doesn't impact me in a massively negative way. But having conversations like these with Ben, things like that, is making me think more about, again, am I kind of, because I'm poo-pooing it in that sense, I'm not necessarily addressing it in some way, shape or form, am I therefore maybe not helping to progress things in a way that I should be? Which is kind of like what I said in the comment that I originally posted. I try and make it so that the focus, whenever I'm trying to engage in these conversations or on those networking events, I'm trying to make the focus be the PA and DA role specifically, trying to raise the profile of everyone, not any kind of like specific individual or minority or anything like that. That's how I personally choose to kind of like go about it. But
I was just thinking the same thing as you then, Dan, in terms of, I think ultimately, whether it's work or you're going to some kind of networking event or Chamber of Commerce, as you've done, you're there to do a specific thing. You're there for a particular purpose. So these, as much as, sometimes these things come up and they do crop up and people make comments and things, that ultimately should be on the exterior of all of that. And if you, as you've rightly done, actually champion the reasons why and the purpose you're there and the mission and what you want to get out of it and what everyone's working towards, it will normalise. I feel it will anyway. I think people will just go to the back of people's minds. It will become, just part and parcel of what that event or that particular forum is. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree with that as well, Ben. Like again, because I'm quite young certainly in terms of having quote unquote PA as my official job title, I go to these events with the mentality of I'm there to learn as much as possible. There are people there who are far more experienced than me, have dealt with a wide variety of different executives. I'm there to learn, and I don't care who I'm learning from. Everyone there has valuable experience, and that's what I'm aiming to give. Maybe because I'm young and male, I might come at something from a different perspective. So, and if people are interested in hearing that, then that's great as well. But for me, it's trying to focus on it being a learning opportunity, because, as today has proved, we're a great community and everyone's willing to share and benefit from those experiences. So yeah, that's what the main focus is for me. Thanks.
Amazing. Thanks, Dan. We have one more question before we log off. And obviously, if anybody wants to connect with Ben after this, then the link to his LinkedIn profile is in your confirmation email that I sent earlier, and it will be again in your follow-up emails. So feel free to continue the conversation or just to say thank you to Ben afterwards if you want. But Uzoma has submitted a question for you, Ben. What is your approach towards your daily EA routine or roles? And does it change at all, do you think? Because, you aren't a typical female PA. Do you think that there is truly any difference?
Do you know? I think there is. I honestly believe there's no difference at all. Because again, at the end of the day, we're all doing we're all there to do the same job, and obviously there are fluctuations and differences in terms of the scope of our roles and what our execs, how much autonomy we get given by our execs, or how much they like to be told and kept up to date with the tiny little nuances of what we do. And yeah, the spectrum's massive, but I also think that there's always going to be certain individual ways of doing things purely because you are your own person. I'm a really strong believer in you be you. You do it how what works for you. So for me personally, I'm log on, set up just as I'm sure a lot of everyone here does. Log on, get everything set up for the day, clear down my inboxes, pass out the messages I need to get done, and then crack on with my projects or crack on with my reports. And it's no different. I think it's exactly the same as what everyone else does. Except for those tiny little changes in terms of scope of role and how we react to things as individuals. But I think it's there's no difference at all, personally.
Well, thank you so much. Honestly, it's been so lovely. I think we both were really looking forward to this, weren't we?
Definitely.
Since Christmas. So Ben, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, I hope you have had a informative and educational and enjoyable time this afternoon. Thank you for coming to hang out with Ben and I. It's been lovely to see so many of you. Just to kind of go over what we said earlier, this is a recorded session. So this will be uploaded to the assistant room later this afternoon. And I will make sure that I include a link to the recording in your follow-up email, so that, if you do want to listen back, or if you want to use this as a training resource or an educational resource for your colleagues or any of your friends, or say, for example, if you have a person who you think would be a fantastic male EA and they're just not 100% sure if it's for them or not, you could potentially share this with them as well. And we've got a couple of other sessions coming up this year for our Colleagues Unite campaign. Next month, we're talking about how to support the mental health of our colleagues. And in March, we are talking about invisible illnesses. So I would love to see as many of you who have been with us today throughout our initial schedule for 2021. But again, thank you so much, Ben, for joining us. It's been a fabulous chat, and I'm really, really thankful that you took the time out to have this conversation. So thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me.
Well, look, everybody have a wonderful day. Please stay safe. Please stay as safe as possible. I know at the minute things are not exactly ideal, but we've got a vaccine around the corner. So hopefully we will all be back to normal soon. And you never know, next time we all see each other, we could be having a glass of wine in the pub, which will be lovely. But thank you, everybody. Have a lovely weekend, because I know that we're close to the weekend. And please feel free to connect with Ben and I afterwards. And I hope to see you all very soon. Take care, everyone.